Hello and a very warm welcome to the final Total Saints podcast before Christmas. I'm Martin Stark and I'm joined by our panel of Saints experts to discuss another 7 days supporting Southampton Football Club. We're streaming this episode of TSP live on our Facebook and our Twitter pages, and it's also on our YouTube channel. Now, if you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, you can get involved in the conversation using the comments section. Coming up this week on the podcast, reaction to the Brentford game being postponed and the current state of the Premier League fixtures. We'll look back at the draw with Crystal Palace and we'll preview a busy festive season in the league with 2 games to look forward to, hopefully. West Ham on Boxing Day and then Spurs at St Mary's. First of all, let me introduce you to our regular TSP guests, just the 2 of them tonight. Steve Grant is the owner of Saints Web, the independent Southampton FC website. How's your week been, Steve?
Yeah, it's been all right. It's been slightly nervy because after my weekend away, a friend of mine tested positive for COVID. So I've been on the lateral flows constantly all week, sort of with a view because I'm flying back out to Dubai tomorrow. But fortunately, the PCR came back negative, so we're good to go.
What about the weather at the moment made you decide to spend Christmas and New Year in Dubai?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's one of those. It's like the Debbie McGee question, isn't
it? Glenn Delacour is the writer of League One -10. That's the weekly Saints blog. Did you find something to fill your Saturday afternoon with? All right, Glenn. I was worried about you for a bit.
Yeah, I did. Can't remember what it was off the top of my head. Oh, it was just getting the house ready for Christmas. Oh, we had a social event that was held over from the previous week. The where the boiler was busted last week, so it was my dad's birthday, so we managed to see him. So we did that on Saturday. Other than that, this week I was supposed to go to a gig on Wednesday night at Southampton Guildhall, which was the Levellers, but for some reason on the Wednesday, the wife decided that we just didn't fancy being in a hot, sweaty room with
people singing "I fancy the drink," just the one.
Exactly, yeah. So we decided not to do that in the end. 10 days before Christmas. So other than that, it's just been work. So a relatively quiet week.
Well, the biggest hello and thank you, of course, is reserved to our patrons, wherever you might be listening or watching this week. Welcome to episode 180 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, 5 Premier League games were called off on Saturday, many more in the lower leagues. Full disclosure, we're not COVID experts. We're not doctors. We're not scientists. You could question what we actually know about football, to be honest, but we are massive fans. So we're probably going to approach this discussion from a football fan's point of view more than anything. Let's start with you, Glenn. Do we play games where possible, or should there be a break?
Well, it's interesting. Just as the titles were going on, a little thing flashed up on my phone. It was a notification from The Athletic. Apparently, the clubs are going to discuss whether the games on the 28th, 29th and 30th are going to take place. So it looks like, there's a possibility that all the games might be canned. And I think that's kind of the way to go. I don't like this, the way it's been with this round of games where some have been on, some have been off, some have been called off very, very late in the day. And I'm very dubious as to how Premier League squads that have got 40 players in them, they can't find enough players to fulfill a fixture and call the game off at short notice. I mean, the worst one I heard of was the Villa against Burnley, which was called off about 4 hours before the kickoff, apparently, which is horrendous because, Burnley fans will have already set off, and it's time and plans and money spent and all that sort of stuff. But if you think that anyone really cares about fans, then sorry, Cloud Cuckoo Land, they don't.
That's the thing with this. By the time you're listening to this podcast, it may well have changed completely, maybe 2 or 3 times. What are we clear on the rules, Steve, about what quantifies a postponement at the moment? Because that seems to be the thing that most fans are getting upset about. What are the rules and how are the Premier League dealing with these postponements?
Well, the problem is actually that by the sounds of it, there are no rules. The Premier League have said we will deal with every request on a case-by-case basis. So while they were reluctant but agreed to postpone a few of the games in midweek. So the Brentford Man United game was called off on. So that was supposed to be played on Wednesday, I think, wasn't it? Same time as ours, but was called off the day before. So at least you've given the travelling fans 24 hours notice that, right, okay, it's not going ahead. I mean, it's still poor for anybody coming down from Manchester, because you'll have paid for your trains, possibly a hotel stay and things like that, and realistically you ain't getting that money back. But certainly there's just a massive inconsistency. I mean, you see Chelsea putting a request in for their game today to be postponed, but Premier League rejected it. The Leicester game originally was they'd originally rejected the request to bin that one off, and then much later on they said, right, no, okay, there's been an increase in numbers, so no, that's going to be off as well. But there doesn't appear to be a fixed number. I think it would be useful if there was a better explanation coming from the Premier League on this. Whether I mean, let's be honest, we know that fans are paid lip service at the best of times, but they could at least give some sort of impression that they care for the people that are actually paying the money through the turnstiles, because they sure as hell banged on about it enough for the 9 months or so that we weren't able to go in the grounds.
If you were in that meeting on Monday morning, Glenn, what would you be saying? What would your point be that you're putting across? Because I get the case by case basis kind of makes sense when you think you only need 3 players to be out if it's your 3 goalkeepers. There's an argument there that says, all right, that's a problem.
I'd heard that one about the goalkeepers.
The groundsman, or you've got someone that would be keeping the bench warm at best. It doesn't make so much sense there. So what would you be saying on Monday morning? What would your advice be?
Well, I just think with the integrity of the competition argument, it's got to be all the games or none of them. It's got to be all the games or you have to try and play. I mean, bad choice of words perhaps, but you can have an epidemic of injuries. Saints have one at the back end of last season where we had 9 players missing or whatever it was, and we had a bench full of 14-year-olds. That sort of, not quite, but you know what I mean. So, you don't have a right to be able to put your best team out on the pitch all the time. But if for fans' safety, primarily, they decide that this round of games on the 28th, 29th and 30th can't go ahead, then that's fair enough. It's just one more round of midweek games, later on in the season, isn't it? So I personally would say that with the sort of heightened anxiety around the whole thing at the moment, from a fan's point of view, it's probably worth, if certainly there will be a date later on in the season when it can be fitted in, that's what we need to do.
Well, it might well end up being that. Steve, what would be the ideal outcome of any meeting for you on Monday?
I mean, I kind of think that it just seems silly to, if you're going to bin off that second round of games after Christmas, the 28th to the 30th. I mean, personally, I wouldn't have those games scheduled then anyway. No. Sort of looking at it from a sort of start of the season fixture list point of view, while yes, it's great that we have this Christmas program where there's games on every day. Fine, stretch one round of games out over 3 or 4 days for the TV companies. That's fine, no problem with that. Don't do 2, because all you're doing is you're weakening the quality of the games. I mean, we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years those games over Christmas. Not only the results being unpredictable is kind of vaguely interesting to an extent, but the quality of the games has been terrible because the players are on their arse.
Because they do 2 rounds of games as well, it always creates a problem because some teams have to play with 1 day's break, basically, and some teams get 5 or 6 days off, and there's always
you know which ones are going to get the biggest breaks.
Yeah,
it sure as hell won't be us.
Do you think money will talk in the end, Glenn? Because I'm thinking about it's Amazon, isn't it, who paid for that round of fixtures? So there's a chance
Amazon got the Boxing Day ones.
So Amazon could potentially miss out on all of their games, and right, you fit them in a bit later down the year. But I guess they've paid for those fixtures because they want people to take advantage of the sales and stuff they might be streaming for the new year. There's a reason why Amazon have picked that round of fixtures, I guess.
Well, money has talked all the way through this. I remember us discussing this at some point last year about how no competition got smaller for the sake of, helping out with the pandemic and less traveling and all that stuff. During the pandemic, we've even got an additional European competition somehow. With this Conference League, which is mental.
Yeah.
It's absolutely mental that they decided to bring that in at a time when traveling is generally not a good idea, unless you're Steve, of course. So money does talk, and that will form part of the discussion. It won't just be about players, and it won't just be about, well, it certainly won't just be about fans. Money will play a huge part, and Amazon will have their say. You could argue whether they should or whether they shouldn't, but at the end of the day, that's the way the world works. They've paid for a product. They probably will be saying that, looking at the viewing figures they would have got on the 27th, on the original planned dates, and they'll be looking at the viewing figures that they're likely to get in March or April, whenever it's replayed, and they will certainly have a say, and that's the world we live in, unfortunately.
Obviously, we're talking about Southampton in the Premier League, Steve, but it's going to have a huge impact if we end up having to miss games and play games behind closed doors in the lower league, because I guess for some of the other clubs, Boxing Day is a huge thing. I'm looking at the Spurs game, and that's the first one to sell out for us. That's not because we're playing Spurs. I think that's because of when it is we all want to leave the house. Clubs are going to be in trouble again if we end up playing behind closed doors.
Yeah, and those festive fixtures are generally big attendances. People get tickets for Christmas and things like that. So yeah, the clubs will have budgeted for sort of big revenues. I mean, obviously, people buying crap in the mega store and
carefully selected merchandise. He means
that's the one. Pies, pints, and whatever. And they'll have budgeted for a certain amount of revenue this side of the new year. Which, I mean, obviously, a pie and a pint isn't going to make the difference between us possibly signing or not signing somebody in the January window, but potentially if we do end up with with some sort of kind of circuit breaker, if to use that horrible phrase that they've been using in the news, and basically just binning off fans in grounds for an initial couple of weeks, the problem is, what if it's not an initial couple of weeks? What if it ends up being extended? And then you're into the situation where actually cash flow is once again a problem. And I mean, as you rightly say, in the lower leagues, it's even more acute, because the vast majority of club revenue in the lower leagues comes through the turnstile.
Yeah, Saint 194 actually says the same as you about the amount of fixtures that we have at this time of year, and actually it kind of is a problem that the Premier League have created for themselves. There's just no breathing space there, is there at all? And actually, I think it was Jack makes a really good point about the league table. It is difficult at the moment nobody wants to be looking at a league table where we've played 18 games, someone else has been played 16 games. We're then falling behind everybody else, and I know it's not the biggest problem in the world at the moment, but it does get a bit all over the place then, doesn't it? It's difficult to know where you are and how to plan for games.
If you're a Saints fan, I suggest not looking at the league table anyway, regardless of how many games each team's played. I never do.
I just worry, I guess, for the fans that are going to be travelling to West Ham on Boxing Day, because that's not a great place to go. There's no trains running anyway. You don't want to get all the way there and then find out that that's off as well. So it'd be interesting to see what they say on Monday. And like I said at the start of this, we're not the experts. We don't really know what the answer is, but we're coming at it from fans' points of view, I suppose. So Let's talk about the one game that did go ahead, though, which seems ages ago now. 2 great goals on the road at Selhurst Park, but again, we threw away a lead and it finished a point apiece. Cast your mind back, gents, to Crystal Palace. Was that a fair result, Steve, that game?
Just about, I think. Certainly, I mean, it flip-flopped quite a bit. First 10, 15 minutes, we looked absolutely hopeless. And you were thinking, oh God, we're in a bit of trouble here. But basically, as soon as Edouard missed that absolute sitter to put them 2-0, all of a sudden we kind of got a grip on the game. Couple of little runs. We had that counter attack which Brozier started and laid it off to Smallbone. Smallbone should have cut inside and had a shot on his stronger right foot, really, but kind of snatched at it and pinged it into the Holmesdale Ultras at the back of the stand there. But that was kind of the moment where we kind of got our stuff together. Got the free kick on the edge of the area. Not convinced there was a huge amount of contact, but if you make a silly challenge in that part of the pitch, then you kind of get punished for it. If it, the referee didn't have a particularly good game. I didn't think. He was giving some really soft things for that. You kind of thought, well, just let that go. But at the same time, he was then blowing up for the same thing 5 minutes later. So it was a bitty game at times, but also when he did let the game flow, it was really entertaining, I thought. Both sides looking to attack, and even sort of second half when we kind of fell back a little bit and tried to kind of stick with what we had to an extent, we were still dangerous on the break. And it's just kind of unfortunate that obviously we didn't know the Brentford game was going to be called off. In a sort of on the night, because otherwise I'm sure Brozier and Teller would have played the full 90. And actually, I think in that situation we may well have gone on to win the game.
Yeah. Entertaining was a word that came around a lot, I think, in everything I heard after the game and read about it. But a good response after a poor start, Glenn. I mean, when we went 1-0 down, I thought, oh God, here we go. This is just going to be one of those nights.
Well, that goal, the first goal, was so bad because we had the ball in a crossing position, basically in the far left corner. We were virtually on the goal line, and I'm there thinking, just cross the ball into the box. We've got a 6'5" centre forward, cross it into the box. But instead, we went backwards, lost the ball with half our team in front of the ball, and 2 passes were 1-0 down. I mean, Palace didn't have to do anything to get to 40 yards from our goal. We did it for them, and it was just horrible play. I mean, I do understand, you attack, and if you're presented with 2 banks of 4 or whatever, and there's no spaces, then you turn around and go backwards and you try and find another angle. That's fine, but we were virtually on their goal line and we still came all the way back and then lost the ball anyway. So bad start. But yeah, I thought, Steve's right. Edouard's miss was horrible. If that had gone in, I think we'd have probably ended up getting beat 3 or 4-0. But we seem to sense that there were goals to be had with Palace's defence. It just wasn't great. Tompkins is slow. The guy they've signed from Chelsea wasn't as good as I thought he'd be. He looked a bit ropey. Gurhey, is it the other centre back? He didn't look great. Joel Ward still getting games in the Premier League miraculously. And it's interesting. Prowse hasn't scored many free kicks recently, but I think a lot of teams they've really sussed out that if you don't tackle our players on the edge of the box, we're probably going to miss anyway. So they don't tend to give us that many. He doesn't seem to have had one from that position, just to the left of centre, which was absolutely ideal. And it's great when it rips into the net. And Brozier's goal is just fantastic, because for me it's just how direct he was. He picks the ball up, turns, one touch, bang. There's no
player in form, isn't it?
There's no thought of anything else. There's no thought of play it out to the wing or knock it back. I'm going to shoot, and that's it was great to go 2-1. I didn't feel we did enough second half to warrant winning the game, and the Palace's equaliser is a bit bizarre, because obviously last year they've obviously changed the handball rule again, because last year I think that would have been disallowed for a handball in the build up. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a weird scenario where actually in that case the keeper is better just letting the ball go in, and then the goal automatically gets disallowed for handball because the scorer has handled it. Whereas because Caballero's made a good save and it falls kindly to Ayew to obviously score his first goal in 47 years.
It's the next phase of play, isn't it?
Yeah, next phase of play. So it's not disallowable. It's just annoying.
So
not sure it's all that logical either.
Yeah, what if it had just kind of brushed Caballero? I mean, obviously he's made a save and he's deflected it, so I can see that argument. But what if it had just sort of like, I don't know, skimmed off the bottom of his shin or something, and would it still have counted even though the ball didn't change direction? I don't know. It just seems absurd to me.
There was another one today, wasn't there, as well? I've got to say, 2-1 up at half time. Going into the break, who had money on Palace winning 3-2? I bet you did, Steve. I bet you were straight on the we're going to screw this up.
No, I didn't actually. I kind of it was odd that I think the last 15 to 20 minutes in that first half was probably the most control we've had in a game against kind of comparative opposition. Because I think Palace are on a similar, not too dissimilar level to us when both of us are playing well. And yet I never felt that we were in any particular danger in that period. Start of the second half, we were largely all right, but it was basically them. Excuse me. Basically throwing caution to the wind, took Kouyate off and put Benteke on. So all of a sudden they've got 4 forwards on the pitch, and I think that kind of flummoxed us a little bit. It wasn't really in an organisational sense. It was more that just for whatever reason, just the ball fell kindly for them a couple of times in and around the penalty area, and they were able to create. It obviously wasn't just the chances for the goal. Edouard had another one where Caballero ended up making a decent double save. But yeah, they kind of created more purely with weight of numbers. In that last half an hour or so than they had done for the vast majority of the first half, really.
Let's talk about some of the individual performances, Glenn, because I thought Nathan Tella had a good game, looked pretty lively.
Yeah, he did. He looked very confident. All that's missing from his game at the moment is a goal, isn't it? He was. They. I mean, I watched the TV coverage. They were pointing out the fact that he was kind of leading the press. He seemed to be the one who was, deciding when to go and when to sort of like drop off a little bit. And I thought he had a very good game, and he, combined with Brozier, they seemed to cause the centre backs all sorts of problems. And to be fair, their centre halves weren't getting much help from their midfield either. So the two of them could drop into pockets of space and then turn and run at Palace, and they seemed to sort of struggle with that. So yeah, it was good, and it was interesting to see Ralph praised the pair of them, didn't he? I anticipated that he, probably at the start of the season, he thought it was going to be Shea Adams and Adam Armstrong the whole season, but it looks like other alternatives are emerging now. And as Steve said, it's he obviously took them off to prepare them for the Brentford game, or to keep them fresh for the Brentford game, and and we ended up with what I can only describe as that front four.
Yeah, it was a strange. I thought it was a strange insight into what could have been, because
yet with that weird front four, we created some decent opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was noticeably slower though. But we talked about that last week, didn't we? About how we might end up starting with Walcott and with Long up front, and then we ended the game. Was it last 15, maybe 20 minutes with them up front? And there was a little insight into there about what might have been had they started. I thought. Brozier, a few comments about him, and are we in danger, Steve, of falling in love with a lone player that's never going to stick around? Do we just enjoy him while he's here? I don't think there's much chance that we're going to be able to do a deal. If you've got a player of his age that's scoring goals like he is, then Chelsea are going to have him back in a heartbeat, surely.
Well, you would think so, but at the same time, Chelsea have the ability to go and spend. Go out and spend £100 million next summer on another already ready-made world-class centre forward if they needed to. I mean, they've already got Lukaku, even though they're not really playing to his strengths at the moment. I don't think they've got Werner, who is better than his finishing record in the last 18 months suggests, and they've got players like Havertz and Pulisic and players like that who can play that role as well. So the question for Brozier is, while I'm sure he would love to be playing in the Chelsea first team next season, but is that actually realistic?
No.
And so from his perspective, is it then a better opportunity to? Obviously he signed a new contract with Chelsea as soon as he signed on loan for us. So they obviously see something in him, but that's long term. It may well be that actually we have an opportunity to get him for another year, because we've clearly got good relations with Chelsea now. The number of transactions we're doing between the two clubs suggests that everybody's well on board, and we quite like the cut of each other's jib.
It's a great option for the players too, isn't it? Because you don't need to move. You just travel down the M3.
It's not far
for training, and you can still go out in London and make the most of it. So I think, another loan for another season seems like it might suit both parties, to be fair. Let's talk about Lianco then. Glenn, I thought he had a tough night against Zaha. It was going to be a tough night for him, wasn't it, coming up against a player of his quality?
Yeah, I thought Lianco did okay. He's a little bit erratic. You can see him getting sent off at some point for clattering into something and then doing something a bit dumb. But what I liked about him and Salisu, they're both relatively young. They're both going to make mistakes occasionally, but they weren't being passive. They were both going into challenges. They were both going into headers. They did okay, and I would have no problem with those two. Sort of like staying in the team and carrying on. I thought he did okay. Lianco is still getting used, obviously, to English football, and the sort of different opponents that you tend to find. So, he'd come up against Edouard is one type of striker, Benteke is another one, and he would have had obviously Zaha on his side of the pitch as well. So that's three completely different style of players to deal with. So, I think the guy's got to be given a bit of a break, and I think he did okay. He's not one for taking a step backwards, and I like that about him. And we need a few, and we said before, we need a few players who are going to be happy sticking their head in where it's likely to get kicked. And he copped an elbow in the face later on.
He had a bloody nose, didn't he, for a bit?
Yeah.
He probably went all Steve Bruce with his Instagram post, didn't he?
Yeah.
see how fat the top of his nose was.
Yeah, but I thought he did well, and he certainly wasn't really to. Zaha stepped inside him for the first goal, but I mean, you're one-on-one with a player like Zaha. The fullback was nowhere because, as said, we'd lost the ball. Behind, fullbacks pushed up like they're supposed to be. So Livramento wasn't back in because we played it backwards and then lost the ball. So I don't think you can blame him too much for the first goal. And overall, I thought he did pretty well.
Can we just all agree between us that we don't want to see any more of Salisu and his long throws? They seem to be persevering with that. And it was like Rory Delap all over again, isn't it? Everyone used to bang on about Rory Delap and his long throw, but we never...
But Delap could actually throw it.
He could actually throw it, that's true, but we never scored from those either. No. It seemed fruitless. And every time he got the ball, we're like, oh, God, no, this is not going to end well.
See, the thing is, I've got no problem with having... a tactic whereby you try and exploit long throws like that when you get throw-ins down sort of in the final 20 yards of the pitch. But why on earth would you have a centre half come over and take it? Surely you work with your fullbacks or maybe your wingers to work on their ability to throw the ball 30 yards deep into the penalty area. Because, to me, Salisu is the kind of guy you want on the end of it, not the one taking it. He's good in the air. He's obviously big and strong, and does win headers. Whereas, Walker Peters would ordinarily be taking throw-ins out on the left-hand side, you would think. And yet, he's 5'9". He's not going to be winning anything in the air. In a sort of packed penalty area. So yeah, I really don't understand it.
And Glenn, it was nice to see Will Smallbone back. There's a few comments in the chat tonight about Will Smallbone. Nice big step back for him, and thought he did well.
Yeah, I thought he did well. He tired as the game went on. He was always going to do that, and it was the right, when they substituted him, it was the right time to do it. But as we said before, no one has really stuck their hand up in those wide areas and say, I have to be picked. You know, people have come in and done okay, and they've, you know, dropped out. Someone's come in and done okay, but no one's really torn up any trees. And I thought Smallbone did pretty well. What surprised me about him is he's quite decent in the air. He seems to keep a lot of stuff alive by sort of winning headers when he gets further up the pitch. And you know, for a guy's first game, big injury, I think he's still only about 21 years old, is he? I thought he did well, and he certainly deserves another chance, and hopefully he'll get them going forward. He's certainly someone I'd prefer to see than some of the others we've got. Put it that way. So you know, get him in there and see how he gets on.
It does say quite a bit about the others that he was straight in the team and started on Wednesday night. Really, the players that he leapfrogged to get that position, which was great. So, depending on the outcome of any meetings early next week, we might have a game against West Ham on Boxing Day at the London Stadium. What have we made to their start of the season, Steve? Because that's not going to be an interesting one for us.
Well, I mean, if you'd asked me that question 3 weeks ago, I'd have said, "Oh God, they're looking very, very good." All of a sudden, couple of injuries. I mean, basically their two best centre halves are out long term, which has scuppered them completely. Because Dawson's decent, but he's not the level of either Ogbonna or
Zuma.
Oh God, Zuma, that's the one. And so as a result, their defence is coming under a lot more pressure, and they're now conceding a few more goals. While at the other end, Antonio seems to have suddenly gone off the boil, which, I mean, we know what comes next.
Yeah.
We've read this book so many times before. So yeah, I mean, they're a good side. Moyes has done a brilliant job there, and I think he's done it in spite of the sort of working conditions in a way, because I mean he's managed sort of the remarkable feat of making David's Golden Sullivan and to a slightly lesser extent Karen Brady keep their mouths shut, which I mean has got to be praised by everybody. I think the less those three are.
You're saying football's a better place?
Oh yes, very much so. Absolutely horrendous individuals.
It's never been a happy hunting ground, though, has it, for us? You know, we never do very well there at all.
No, I mean,
it's a horrible place to go.
Yeah, first time we went there to the new ground, we beat them very comfortably and won 3-0. It could have been 6 or 7. Back in those days, under the attack-minded Claude Puel.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, every time since, I think we've shipped 3 goals every game. So yeah, I mean that's a target. That is the target, to basically not do that again.
Yeah.
Baby steps. We'll obviously be underdogs for that game, but with their injuries then and some slight form issues with their attacking players, yeah, who knows? I mean, I'm slightly more confident now than as I say I would have been 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Can you see us getting anything out of that, Glenn? There's a chance that Adam Armstrong might come back in, Che Adams, maybe Fraser Forster. Depends if it's too soon for Stuart Armstrong or not. But is it going to be another 3-1, 3-0?
West Ham, they always seem to steamroller us because they are a very physical, big, strong side, lots of athletes. And we don't seem to compete. We just seem to go into our shell and, you know, curl up in a ball and wait to get beaten. That seems to be what happens whenever we play them. The absences of Ogbonna and Zuma are huge, because that's 2 out of the spine of the team. And as we found out when we played Arsenal, you take the physically strong players out of the spine of the team, and it does cause you all sorts of problems. So it puts more emphasis on Declan Rice to be more defensive in midfield, which obviously helps if he's not supporting the attack. And as Steve said, Antonio's gone off the boil. So there is a chance. They do have players, still have a lot of players that cause us problems, usually the likes of, Bowen, Ben Rama, Lanzini, Fornals. They're all that's their sort of number 10s, if you like. They're creative players. And we always seem to struggle with their fullbacks. But I know they've had injuries at fullbacks as well. Cresswell's not been around, and Soufal, and who's the young lad they've got? Johnson. He's been injured as well. So they do
suspended as well.
Oh, is he?
Boxing Day.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing as well for us. So, it depends what team they put out and what mindset we have. I mean, I'm never one for looking at, we haven't won there since 1982 or whatever, but the last 2 or 3 games have followed a pattern where we've just been battered, and we have a lot of the same players. So they have to get that out of their head if the game does go ahead, and go there and try and put on a decent performance. But it still seems for us to be a very, very difficult place to go. So I certainly wouldn't be expecting anything, put it that way.
Can I trouble you both for a score prediction then, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going for improvement.
It's that Steve sigh again, isn't it?
Yeah, improvement, but not quite getting the job done. So probably 1-0 defeat.
Okay, Glenn.
I'll be optimistic as it's Christmas. I'll go for a 2-2 draw again.
Okay, all right, we'll take that.
2 all over the place.
Then it moves on to, or our attentions move on to Tottenham, which is Tuesday. That's the 28th. That's the bank holiday, isn't it? It's a 3 o'clock kickoff. As we mentioned earlier, the first game this season to sell out. If it goes ahead, there'll be a full crowd at St Mary's, which should help. That's going to be well, they had a good result this weekend. Steve, what have you made of their form recently?
Well, I mean, we haven't seen them play for about 3 months, have we? Yeah, basically every game's been off, hasn't it? I mean, I wonder if that spell off has kind of given Conte an opportunity to mould the team into some sort of proper functioning system, rather than the one that we saw. I mean, even the early games under him, we've seen them go like full halves without a single shot, and you think, I mean, this is a side that's got 2 world-class centre forwards, and yet they just provide them with pretty much zero service. I mean, judging by today, I mean, they created a lot of chances today against Liverpool. I mean, Van Dijk wasn't there, and you could tell because there was a gaping hole at the centre of their defence. But yeah, I mean, Spurs are going to be a challenge. They're still a good side. They're still a good crop of players. Even under bad managers, they've beaten us before. So I certainly wouldn't put us as favourites. But it's one of those where you kind of see how the land lies after the Boxing Day games. I mean, it may well be that Spurs have got more players that are knackered after that game than we have. I mean, by the sound of it, this is the game that's potentially the one that they'll, as we said earlier, the one that they'll bin off till later in the season, and not sure whether that suits us or not, to be honest. I mean,
they wait till Stuart Armstrong's fit, and then once
that'd
he's
be
fit,
fine.
But
then we do have to fit it in this season. So, but it's. I mean, I just find it absolutely bonkers that the Premier League is genuinely asking teams to play 2 games in 2 days.
Do you think squad rotation will come into play then, Glenn, for this one, assuming that both the games go ahead? We're going to see some different faces, I guess? It's
bound to. It's bound to. Maybe not so much for us, because we just don't have, we don't have a huge squad, but we have more this year than we have in previous years. So, yeah, so maybe you might see the likes of, Roman Perot might play a game, who's not been involved much recently. As we say,
Tino needs a rest.
He does.
We've got to give him a week off at some point.
Yeah. So yeah, we may see some different players from us. And Spurs, I mean, Conte doesn't seem to have a settled team at the moment, particularly in midfield. He seems to pick different midfields every week. So I mean, Dele Alli played his first game today. And Dombele's played one, Højbjerg's played a couple, Harry Winks has played a couple. So they seem to be swapping players all over the place and swapping formations. So they're still obviously a work in progress under the new manager. Very convenient of them, yeah, as Steve said, to be able to work on a few things. Not that I'm cynical or anything like that, but
although it was annoying that Kane should have been sent off today and didn't get sent off.
Yeah. That's always the way when you're England captain. Do you remember when Alan Shearer volleyed Neil Lennon's head down the touchline? I'm England captain. You can't send me off for that. Oh, okay. So I don't know what Spurs would turn up, but it's certainly a game that we don't have to go in with any inferiority complex. They could be good, they could be rubbish, but we've got to handle Son Heung-min a lot better than we normally do, because he's the one that causes us all the problems.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the insanely high line that we play.
The high line against Spurs and getting caught on getting caught out again.
We got done because of that, and because we were a very slow defence last year. I mean, whatever we put out on the pitch, it will be quicker. So hopefully our recovery will be better. Hopefully we won't play as high, and hopefully we'll handle Son Heung-min a lot better than we did certainly in the home game last season. But he did for us in the away game as well. And let's hope if he dives this time that the referee spots it. And but yeah, I don't know who the referee is. Don't know if it's been appointed yet. But that always seems to be a bit of an issue when we play Spurs.
Let's get predictions for Spurs then. There's a lot that could and may happen between now and that game. We've got no idea who's going to be starting, if the game's going to be going ahead. Steve, what do you reckon? I appreciate it's like plucking numbers out of the air for this.
To be honest, knackered players, 0-0.
Glenn?
I'll go for a streaky 1-0 win. I'm being very optimistic today.
Let's just hope we can all get out of the house, get some fresh air and watch some football. Quick word on the women's team, by the way. Great week for them, because they won in the FA Cup, beating Portsmouth 2-1. And I think they won in the league as well, Steve. Happy days.
Yeah, I did find it odd that that Pompey chose to play the league game at Fratton Park and the cup game at Wesley Park, which is Hampton Waterlooville's ground. When you'd have thought that the prestige would have made you switch that around, but either way, no, two great wins, but very very tight, very close fought. Which I think, given the respective budgets, I think probably we would have expected to have won both of those games a little bit more comfortably. But I mean, the old cliches of derby games being a bit of a leveler and that sort of thing come to the fore to an extent, but got the job done eventually. So yeah, all good.
We'll take it. Put a smile on my face anyway. That's good. Almost it for episode 180. Before we finish, though, just time for our weekly patron shouts. And we start with the new signing. And I've got a lovely message which says, I'm wishing my dad, Nigel Swatridge, a very Merry Christmas. And as an early Christmas present, I'm delighted to have signed him up as a TSP Bobby Stokes patron. We both love the podcast, which is nice to hear. We find it a great way to share in our own Saints thoughts and emotions, and look forward to supporting it further over the coming months. So, Dad, Merry Christmas from me. Enjoy the early Christmas present, and welcome to the TSP patron community. And that is from Chris. So, lovely message. Thank you, Chris, and welcome Nigel, who's Chris's dad. To find out more about becoming a TSP patron and the benefits that come with it, do check out the website. And thanks as always to our Matt Letizia tier patrons. That's Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, and Phil Cook. Also, Nick Reed, who's in our Francis Benali tier. My thanks to Steve and to Glenn. Happy Christmas to you both, chaps. So, Steve, you're away, right, for Christmas? First time?
Yep, yeah. Christmas Day on the beach. It's gonna be different, but comfortable, hopefully.
Christmas Day on Western Shore, Glenn? What's
I was just about to say that. Looking for the site of the old seaweed hut on Western Shore. I'll pop down there. I might take a walk around. I'll get the job of walking the dogs on Christmas morning. So I might push the boat out and go to Royal Victoria Country Park. But other than that, I won't be in Dubai. I'll be in Hedge End.
Lovely. Anyway, thank you both for your contributions, and have a great Christmas. Don't forget to follow this podcast podcast wherever you're listening, and you can always get in touch on the socials. It's at Total Saints Pod. You'll find us on Twitter and Facebook. You can drop us an email via the website. Thanks as always for listening. Thank you if you've been watching live tonight. Stay safe, enjoy whatever football we get, and have a fantastic Christmas.